I am a former K-12 teacher and former dean, so I might do a lot of call and response. So if you can work with me, that'll be great. I'm also coming to you after lunch and before the end of the day, so I got to kind of keep it lively to keep you all engaged. So my name is Dr. Tony Johnson. As I said, I've served as a dean, alternative education teacher, alternative high school principal in a former life, and I bring all of these to bear in the realm of education. And that is, of course, my picture that I paid for. Alrighty, so the impacts of education. What we know about the global pandemic is that there are a couple of things that have been impacted, right? Both technology, some of the things we saw in our student behaviors, attendance, some perspectives parents may have. Yes? Oh, thank you. You're great. Thank you. See what happens when you just rush? You're just like, oh my gosh, jacket's tough. Thank you so much. Parents' perspective, educator impacts, communication, and student outcomes. So, okay. So technology. We know that there are a lot of students who did not have technology at home, right? So very quickly, school districts as well as colleges and universities had to quickly purchase a lot of technology, right? Both laptops, hotspots, and et cetera, to give students access to technology. And although we know that the digital divide exists, I'm not sure if we knew to what magnitude until the pandemic hit, and we had to quickly redirect some of those resources to purchase technology for students to have access to that. But also what we learned is our teachers were not necessarily as ready and trained to use technology in an effective way for instruction, right? So I think we kind of knew teachers had varying levels of technological experience, right, and expertise, but I'm not sure we knew until quickly we had to pivot to online instruction, right? So what we found is that quickly school districts also had to quickly train teachers on not necessarily putting the technology in their hands, right, but how to use it effectively for students to learn, right? And then also what we didn't know, I don't think, is that there's a steep learning curve with the way in which students are able to use technology, right? Because Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and all the other social media platforms is not productivity IT software, is it? Right? So a lot of the young people were very accustomed to using social media platforms, right? But when it comes time to use Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Google Slides, et cetera, to turn in assignments, there was a very steep learning curve for a lot of students on the online platform, okay? Student behaviors. Educators report that student behaviors were more manageable in the virtual space than they were in person. Anybody want to say why they think that's the case? I told you wouldn't call a response. You didn't think I was going to do it, did you? So educators said, many of them, that on the online environment, student behaviors were more manageable than when they were in person. Not their physical? Well, that's true. Well, I don't know. I had to mediate one online. It was a really nasty chat. Uh-huh. Right. Yes, ma'am. True. But also, what is the dynamic that happens in person, right? And when you think about a classroom, right, you might, as a little kid, I might go grab something off of your desk and go run around with it. So there's certain, behaviors that children do in person that you can't do that with a camera that's just kind of sitting in front of you. You know what I mean? So some of those kind of in-person behaviors that kind of distracted from teaching and learning significantly decreased in the online platform, okay? Some students' confidence bolstered quite a bit. There's a lot of research that says some of them were quiet students were more vocal online. Why do you think that's the case? Right. Absolutely. Not embarrassed. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. With the blue? Absolutely. 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 And attendance increased exponentially online. Why is that? Right, absolutely, right? The whole getting dressed, walking to school, catching a bus, or whatever, parent taking them to school, that factor was eliminated. So that meant that all students had to do is roll over, log on to the laptop, and you're on, baby. All right? So we saw some increases in student attendance as well, which is great. Uh-oh. Oh, oh. As soon as I look away, right? All right, there we go. Also, highly motivated students also increased their learning, and the quality of their projects that they submitted were even of higher quality in the online environment. And why is that the case, you think? They have more time to think and work, and guess who else was home? They, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely, right? What did it say? Mom and dad, first teacher of children, right? So mom and dad were home as well to provide support. Some community colleges and university faculty state that asynchronous instruction provided greater flexibility among students. So some folks were taking care of other family members, siblings, etc. They said that the online environment allowed them to complete some of their assignments in a way that allowed them to meet the deadlines in a way that's very different than in person. Okay? Students state that they felt more ownership of their learning, right? Where they were able to feel more empowered by having ownership in their learning as well. And then a summer learning loss or gain is attributed to schools providing personalized instruction in the access to educational resources that families and systems provide to children across the year and what is required to meet their unique personal learning style. So what we learned is that personalized instruction works, right? And to the extent that we've learned what that looks like online, that we need to replicate some of those same personalized learning experiences in person as well. There's not sufficient time and resources to plan for individualized student learning when it came to instruction, right? We just had to pivot really quickly, right? So whether you were an auditory learner or a kinesthetic or another type of learner, we didn't have the time to create lesson plans to meet that for you, right? But now that we're coming out of the pandemic, we need to be more thoughtful, right? And ensure that we create those experiences for students. Some community colleges and university faculty state that asynchronous instruction provided greater flexibility among students, and students became more self-directed and independent, and students feel more ownership, again, in their learning. All right? All right, students said in several studies that guess what? They did not like emailing their instructor to ask a question, right? Because after you send the email, you have to wait, right, for a response. And if there are 35 of us in this section, 35 of us in this section, 35 of us in this section, and one instructor, right, the instructor has to get through all of those emails. So students said they really, really did not like the lag and delay and not getting the immediate feedback, okay? The temporary elimination of standardized assessments is another thing. So what does standardized assessments do? Anybody? Call and response. You thought I was done. No, not yet. We're in this together, people. Standardized assessments. What does it do? Absolutely. Absolutely. Say it again? Stresses you out. Absolutely. Does that too. Anybody else? So let me give you a quick example, and this is tied to exactly what you said, man. So in kindergarten, right, I was doing good, playing, doing my little stuff, learning my numbers and alphabets and all that stuff, right? About 2 months to the end of the school year, right, teacher calls my mom in and says, he's not emotionally ready for the first grade. We can't do this. We need to hold him back in kindergarten, right? I'm devastated. I played, I counted, I did the colors. What do you mean? And my mom was like, hey, she's a teacher, she knows best, and that's what we're going to do. So here I go. Did I go into kindergarten again? No, my school had an innovative name. It was called Pre-First, okay? So, true story, people. So I finished kindergarten, and now I'm in Pre-First, right? And all of my other folks who didn't make it to Pre-First are now in the first grade 2 halls over, right? So we're not done. We know pre-first is you're still not there, right? So time for 3rd grade, right? What happens in 3rd grade? Standardized testing. Boy, I'm scared now, folks. You know why? I already had to do that pre-first thing, right? And I'm just like, oh, here's pre-4th, right? So what do you think happened when I took standardized assessment? Almost, right under gifted, right? So from there, it put me on a whole nother trajectory. Now I'm on the college readiness track in in the advanced track in elementary school. I go to the college track in middle school and continue the same thing in high school, right? So a standardized assessment in a lot of ways doesn't do what it was intended to do. And it sorts students in a lot of very negative ways. So I said all that to say in the pandemic, when we took standardized assessment out, right? Nobody was coming to the school to do assessments. So what did that mean in terms of how we assess students? Absolutely, it created a level playing field. So what it also means is that now we need to go back to the drawing table and reconceptualize how we're going to assess students moving forward. Okay, does that make sense, folks? Okay, I know I only got 12 minutes and 42 seconds, but who's counting, right? All right. Okay. Student learning. Reduced learning time has likely impeded student learning and affected the development of the whole child. Students have become more self-directed, independent, and improved time management skills. Research on chronic absenteeism and on remote learning reinforces the urgency of providing appropriate support to children who are least prepared, to those who are at risk of becoming disengaged and eventually dropping out. Okay, keep going. Instructors said, oh my gosh, we were able to collaborate more effectively online than we did in person. Why do you think that's the case? Less distractions. What happens in the class building? Your principal's coming, hey, new report, you need to do this. Students come and parents, and so you don't have a lot of those distractions. So teachers said the quality of their planning together was more collaborative and more substantive, okay, and online. Educators also said that they grew professionally more in the online environment than they felt they did in person as well because of that, right? Also, districts who went to a Monday through Thursday academic calendar and Friday was reserved for administrative said that they felt more productive, right? Because on Friday it was reserved for them to grade papers, to do assessments, and do more in-depth lesson planning. You all agree with that? All right. Parents said that although the pandemic is ending, we hope, I think, maybe, that there are some elements that happened during the pandemic that they want to continue. One of them is the hybrid schedules. Many parents throughout the country and the world are saying we don't want to go back to that Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:45 schedule. We want to see some semblance of hybrid. So a lot of school districts are getting that feedback. Also, parents said that they like to see later start times for schools and not the early 7:15, 7:30 crash and burn time as well, right? And parents say, hey, guess what, school districts? You figured out a way to purchase laptops and hotspots through the pandemic. Keep figuring it out. Okay, so a lot of parents are saying that the access to technology that the school districts provided, they need to continue to provide those and to ensure that their child can learn, okay? Parents also said, hey, I thought teachers had an all right job, but in this pandemic, I have a deeper appreciation for what they do. And I thought I had an appreciation for what they do, but now I see firsthand what they do, and I have a deeper appreciation for that. So you hear a lot of parents and the researchers saying that they have a deeper appreciation for what they see teachers do. Okay? Both instructors and parents report communication between them increased in a very positive way. Some of the parents said that prior to the pandemic, when they got outreach from the teacher, it was all about Johnny's bad, Johnny was talking, Johnny didn't do this, or Susan didn't do that. But they said in the pandemic, it was more positive communication. Guess what Johnny did today on the Zoom meeting? He was great, and it was more positive feedback and more quality communication between the parent and the instructor. Okay? All right, where do we go from here? All right, so we've learned that students need to feel more ownership and stay engaged, right? And how we do that is we do what? We give students more ownership of their learning, right? We also learn that grades, as traditionally used, miss the mark. And why do grades miss the mark, you think? Not all at one time. One more time? Right, doesn't measure what they know. Okay, good. Also, we should adopt standards-based grading practices instead of you did or you didn't do the necessary assignment, right? Secondary students were stressed out about school, right? And this is what a lot of the research shows, that a lot of secondary students were extremely stressed out. I know when I was in high school, I was stressed, I tell you. Between chemistry, biology, Cal 2, and I had a part-time job, it was tough, right? So what the research is saying that we're not too sure if high workloads in high schools is equating to better learning outcomes for students, right? And that we need to maybe look at more quality assignments, right, instead of more of it. You know what I mean? So lighten the workload, but make more substantive assignments for students, right? Don't know how healthcare ended up down there at the bottom, but pretend you all don't see that part, okay? All right, strategies. Redesign the education system to focus on nurturing the whole child, enable students to have access to the resources and conditions to learn and develop. And I'm speaking at another conference in Grapevine, Texas this summer, and that's one of the things I'm going to charge the administrators in the building to do is say, hey, we figured out where the resources were when we had to, didn't we? Quickly, right? That we have to always do that and look at innovative ways to use local and federal funding to support the whole child in a very meaningful way, okay? Learning has been disruptive. We must use diagnostic, formative, and summative assessments to create a plan to address learning loss. And we learned that educators over-directed learning and over-structured tasks. Do you agree with that? Yes? Yes? Okay. All right. So 5 quick things. Strong relationships are at the heart of learning. Blended, personalized, project-based learning is important. Problem solving and critical thinking matter. Wraparound services and laser focus on student well-being is important. And ongoing and quality feedback are also very important. Okay? Contingency planning. Also, what we can't do, right, is come out of the pandemic and believe that another pandemic may not happen in the world, right? Or a natural disaster or something else, right? And we need to plan for this stuff, right? Like, as much billions of dollars that we've wielded towards education during the pandemic, I'm not sure if we plan for if pandemic part 2 or 3 happens, right? And we need to do a lot of contingency planning in education. And also, who suffered the worst was low-income students, right? Low-income students didn't have the same resources, not necessarily the quality of professional development of its teachers. So a lot of low-income students really suffered quite a bit. So we need to solve for their learning loss, for sure. Uh-oh. Okay. All right. Also, I would say maybe I received this 10% of my K-12 experience. We must explain to students the why, right? What is the learning objectives of this unit? What are the goals? And guess what? Let's show the students what an exemplar looks like for this assignment and what does non-mastery look like for this assignment, right? Because then students will have what? A clear vision of what they need to achieve, okay? Prior to the pandemic, grades were used to reward and punish. We learned that grades were not enough in the pandemic to motivate students to complete assignments and to strive to do well. I couldn't tell you the amount of Zoom calls I've been on with teachers and students where the teacher would threaten the grade and the student would log off. So one of the things that we need to do is know that grades in and of itself is not a threatening thing that would make a difference. Okay, also, students fail courses in virtual learning because of a lack of work completed, not because of non-mastery. One solution is to shift to competency and standards-based grading. Next, the pandemic taught us that attempting to teach, teach and expect, and we expect the students to learn too much content in a short period of time. That we need to chunk these things in smaller chunks rather than the large instruction that we've been doing. And then rigor, we know that term very well, right? It's written in articles, we've been in professional developments with it, but rigor has been meant to mean a tremendous workload, really, if you really think about it, right? But it shouldn't be that. To the contrary, rigor really means the depth of higher order thinking skill, synthesis, analysis, right? That's truly what rigor is. It isn't having students do 5 hours of homework. That's not rigor, right? It's just a lot of homework. All right? All right, so this goes to my friend in the back with the black jacket on. She's in her phone now, but yeah, her, yeah. So we talked about grading, yes. So we talked about a different grading system. So one suggested grading system is that we grade students in domains. So one domain could be academic grade or mastery learning, domain 2 could be work habits, domain 3 can be participation, and domain 4 is attendance. And not that each of these domains are graded equally, have equal weights. So they definitely should have different weights there, for sure. All right. Quick strategies. I'll skip over this for effective strategies for the instructor. Here are some wonderful references. And for my friend in the back with the blue jacket on who was taking pictures, there's your QR code, my friend. So you can get the whole PowerPoint. All right. We have 2 minutes and 39 seconds for questions. Yes. No, I didn't do thank you for that. I would definitely take pride in doing the research myself, but I did not. So if you check out my reference links, it has all the research studies on those reference links. Yep. Yes, sir.
You mentioned how all of the positive things that came out of the pandemic and online learning and e-learning tools for the most part. And yet, the studies that I've read show that broadly, the learning went down across the country. I know in Utah that 50% was, it dropped by 50% in terms of learning.
Right.
Simply because the kids got Zoom fatigue.
Sure.
They ran out of the room. They were playing video games on their smartphones while they're supposed to be listening to class.
Sure.
So the actual learning gains went down. I don't know if my apocryphal information is accurate or not. I want your opinion on it.
No, it's definitely accurate. So what you will notice about all of the slides was it was about things that we saw and learned. No slide said that students' learning increased in the pandemic. None of them said that because it was good. But we did learn things about teachers. We learned things about parents. We learned things about student behavior. So those were the learnings that this focused on. But to your point, I think studying education phenomena 2.0, right? We need to see how can we transform to do a high-quality learning environment so that academic achievement also increases virtually. Absolutely. We need to start a work group on that, I think, my friend. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Sure. So there's a couple of things embedded in what you said. So one, there is research out there about which instructors can pivot to online and have increased outcomes on online, and I think we need to really study that, right? Like, because I've heard some folks say an instructor in person was subpar, but they went online and they just kind of blossomed. And we need to see why is that the case? What were the salient characteristics there? And there is some standardized assessments, but it's very expensive because it requires a one-on-one virtual proctor to do it online. And I think a lot of school districts haven't figured out how to do it in a cost-effective way right now. But I definitely know that that's a conversation through the country that folks are trying to figure out because so much uncertainty in the world happens. So we need to kind of nail that down quickly. Yes.
Especially with the online media, we do a lot of things to create engagement and other things. What is, in your opinion, one sure way of achieving the accountability in schools?
I think making sure that students are clear of the expectations that we have of them, and also making sure we have high quality professional development of faculty. I think those two are critical to high level high level quality online experiences for sure. And I don't think we always do that well, because I was talking to a large school district and all of their professional development is done via Zoom. Like there's no learning modules that instructors go do in like an LMS system and that kind of thing. And I was really surprised because I think there takes a lot of different ways to ensure that instructors' crafts continue to improve. Yeah. So my time is at 0 and the host is smiling at me. Thank you all so very much. I appreciate it.